Okay, our next speaker is Michael Shenkar. Wait. Michael Shenkar is Associate Professor of Pre-Islamic Iranian Studies at the Department of Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. His specialization is the study of civilizations and cultures of the pre-Islamic Iranian world through their material remains and visual representations. His research interests include the archaeology, art, and religions of the pre-Islamic Iran and Central Asia, Zoroastrianism, the culture of the Iranian nomads, the Sogdian civilization, and the Silk Road. His publications include a monograph on the ancient Iranian religious iconography, which was published with Brill in 2014, and articles on various aspects of archaeology, art, religion, and history of pre-Islamic Iran and Central Asia. Since 2014, he has been directing, together with Sharif Kurbanov of the Tajik Academy of Sciences, the excavations of the Sogdian site Sanjar Shah in northern Tajikistan. And the title of his talk is When East Meets West, Religious Syncretism in the Kushano-Sasanian Kingdom. Please.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Professor Finkelberg, thank you very much for this kind introduction. I would like to thank the Israel Academy of Sciences and Professor Strumza for organizing this wonderful event. This one, can you hear me well? For organizing this wonderful event commemorating my teacher, Professor Shaul Shaked. As Professor de Jong said, we will now move to the eastern domains of the Sasanian Empire, and we will switch from questions about philological sources and their relevance and their importance to material sources. So, in the 3rd century CE, the newly established Sasanian dynasty succeeded in conquering the core lands of the Kushan Empire north of the Hindu Kush. This event had far-reaching consequences for the history and culture of the ancient Iranian world. While becoming part of the Sasanian Empire, the former Kushan Bactria Toharistan, now known as Kushan-Shahr, the kingdom of the Kushans, managed to preserve its language and culture. Kushan-Shahr was also the only region in the Sasanian Empire to mint its own coinage, no doubt due to the fact that it was the only area under the Sasanian control with its own distinctive imperial tradition. The meeting of these two parts of the Iranian world, the Western and the Eastern, resulted in a fascinating cultural merging, which was especially remarkable in the religious and cultic sphere. The Kushan cultic practices were essentially a continuation from the Greco-Bactrian period and were centered on veneration of anthropomorphic statues of deities. It is this Eastern Iranian tradition, which achieved its fully developed form under the Kushans, was encountered by the Sasanians after their conquest of Bactria Toharistan in the 3rd century. The Sasanian cult, maintained by the rulers of Pars from the Achaemenian period, was aniconic and was focused on the worship of constantly sustained sacred fire. These differences in cultic practices between the Eastern and the Western Iranian world emerged in the Hellenistic period, when Bactria, in contrast with Pars, was subjected to the profound Greek influence. With the Sasanian conquest, for the first time since the Hellenistic period, the aniconic West met the iconic East, conquering it, and creating what appears to be a unique syncretistic cult. In addition to the remains of the temples and few wall paintings, the most important source for the official religion and cult in the Kushano-Sasanian period are coins minted by the Kushan Shahs. Most of the studies on the Kushano-Sasanians are indeed numismatic in nature, but the absolute and even relative chronology and the number of kings remain a matter of debate. The Kushan coinage depicted almost 30 different gods and goddesses. The Sasanian official iconography made use of only 3 deities, Ahura Mazda, Mithra, and Anaita, and on the Kushano-Sasanian coins defined representations of 5 gods, Anaita, Nana, Ardoksho, Mithra, and Osho, Vesh. The central themes of Kushano-Sasanian coinage continue to be a representation of a standing king making a libation on a portable incense burner and divine investiture. Right. This is an emblematic Kushan representation. However, in contrast with the Kushan coins, some Kushano-Sasanian issues depict the king and the investing deity holding a diadem on the same size of the coin, and therefore there can be little doubt that these compositions represent real cultic statues. The Kushano-Sasanian rulers were depicted worshipping these enthroned statues with the primary ritual of the former Kushan cult, pouring incense over a small portable altar. In addition to the typical Sasanian investiture scene where the god Mithra extends a diadem to a ruler placed on the other side of the fire altar, there are 2 new modes of divine representations that appear on the Kushano-Sasanian coinage and are not adapted to Sasanian prototypes. First, most gods are now depicted enthroned. In Sasanian iconography, gods were not represented in this way, and thus this is a specifically Kushan development. God Manabag, for example, was depicted enthroned already on the Kushan coins, probably reflecting the fact that most divine statues in the Kushan temples were indeed enthroned. Second, some deities were represented as a bust on top of a fire altar. This will be discussed later. 2 additional observations testify to the mutual Kushano-Sasanian religious acculturation. The gods, including the Sasanian Persian goddess Anaita, were giving weapons, clearly reflecting Kushan traditions and in contrast with the iconography in Sasanian Iran, where deities never carry arms. At the same time, Kushan gods such as Vesh and Mithra, although Mithra was also an important Sasanian god, were given Sasanian appearance in their hairstyle and garment. Yeah? They took the same gods, but dressed them differently in Sasanian fashion, not as they previously were on the Kushan coins. This cultural conversion is also apparent from the fact that the unique Kushan practice of labeling gods on coins was not only continued, but in addition to using local Bactrian language, some gods were now identified also in Middle Persian. In coins inscriptions, some Kushano-Sasanian kings, like their Western superiors, called themselves Mazdesen, Mazda worshipping, thus indicating their Zoroastrian affiliation. However, Ahura Mazda, who is usually depicted bestowing kingship with a royal diadem in the investiture scenes in the West, does not appear at all at Kushan Shahr. Instead, it is Anaita who acts as the main deity of investiture on the first coins issued by Kushano-Sasanians. Anaita was not attested previously in Kushan Bactria, neither on coins or inscriptions nor in personal names. It seems clear that she was a Persian goddess brought to Bactria by the new Sasanian rulers. The continuous worship and importance of Nana, who was the head of the Kushan royal pantheon under the Kushano-Sasanians, provides compelling evidence that the latter was not identified with Anaita in the Kushan pantheon, as is often suggested, and that they were separate and unrelated goddesses. Nevertheless, Nana was perhaps displaced from the position of source of kingship that she had enjoyed under the Kushans. At least this is the impression one gets from the coinage. 4 iconographic types of Anahita are known on the Kushano-Sasanian coins more than any other deity. On the first one, the goddess is enthroned frontally under an arch of a temple. She offers a royal diadem and holds a spear. Her crown consists of 3 vegetal elements. On the second type, the standing goddess with the spear and the same headdress presents the Kushan Shach with the tall Kushan crown. On the third type, the king makes a libation before a statue of Anahita, who now has a unique trapezoid headdress and holds a bow. On another type, the goddess with the same curious headdress appears as a bust rising from an altar, but this time she offers a royal diadem and holds a spear. This representation of Anahita has no known prototype in Sasanian iconography. Nana also makes an appearance as a similar bust placed atop of an altar. Another goddess found on coins, who continues from the Kushan pantheon, is Ardoksho. However, the most dominant deity on Kushano-Sasanian coins is Oisho, Vesh, one of the most important Kushan gods and probably Nana's consort in the Kushan pantheon, who is no longer identified by his Kushan name, but rather by a new title. Here you can see it, Borzand Yazad, or Bag Borzand in Bactrian, or Burzavand Yazad in Middle Persian, meaning something like the exalted, the high god. Like the Kushan predecessors, some Kushan Shachs were depicted standing and making a libation before the trident of Vesh, while also holding the same divine weapon. Even when the reverse shows the king worshipping Anahita, as you can see here, the obverse still depicts him making a libation to the symbol of Vesh. One cannot fail to notice that exactly as the Sasanian official iconography, rock reliefs and coins, also the Kushano-Sasanian coins essentially show a triad of deities. Noteworthy that 2 out of 3 deities are the same in both cases, Anahita and Mithra. The third god is Ahura Mazda in Sasanian Iran and Vesh in Bactria. It is possible, therefore, that the new Sasanian overlords of Bactria perceived Vesh as the equivalent of Ahura Mazda in the local pantheon. Additional deities depicted on the Kushano-Sasanian coins are Nana and Ardoksho, but they appear only on rare copper issues of a king called Piros, probably Piros I, minted in Gandhara, and are therefore local issues. There is also additional evidence that clearly shows that veneration of other gods from the Kushan pantheon, in addition to those depicted on coins, continued in Kushan Shachar. Thus, a recently published Bactrian inscription from the 4th century records a donation of a silver plate which was made by a certain Sengul to the god Mana, undoubtedly reflecting an offering to the temple of this god. The content of the inscription seems to indicate that the sanctuary of the god Mana, who must be identified with Manabag from the Kushan pantheon, which we've already seen, possessed vineyards and villages. Additional evidence for the continuation of worship of some gods from the Kushan pantheon in the Kushano-Sasanian period include a seal of probable Kushano-Sasanian manufacture depicting Diana as the anthropomorphic personification of good deeds, accompanied by 2 dogs meeting the souls of the departed. Another seal of possible Kushano-Sasanian attribution is engraved with an image of Mithra rising from the mountain, which fits the description of Mithra as surveying the world from Mount Hara in the Avestan passage. It is probably not accidental that the meeting between the institutionalized Zoroastrianism of the Sasanians and the established Kushan tradition of anthropomorphism in religious imagery produced these rare pictorial representations that can be matched with Zoroastrian texts and are not found in Sasanian Iran itself. Another seal, probably dated to the Kushano-Sasanian period and inscribed in Bactrian, depicts a high-ranking character in Sasanian, Kushano-Sasanian garments, venerating a large standing statue of Vishnu. Based on the personal names attested in the collection of Bactrian documents dating from the Kushano-Sasanian period to the Arab conquest, it seems that Kushan gods like Yamsh, Mithra, Nana, Vesh, Vaksh remained popular deities in Bactria long after the end of Kushan and Sasanian rule. Another important innovation of the Kushano-Sasanian iconography is the appearance of a lotus blossom or lotus bud on top of the royal crowns. You can see here the lotus bud, lotus blossom on top of the royal crowns. It becomes an essential element of the Kushano-Sasanian headdresses. Here again, we can possibly see a fusion of both Kushan and Sasanian traditions. Conceptually, the lotus flower goes back to the tree-like element on the top of some Kushan royal headdresses. You can see here stylized tree on the crown of Kanishka. At the same time, it also bears a clear visual allusion to the Sasanian royal corimbus. This is a piece of precious fabric which covered globe of hair of the Sasanian kings and was special and was reserved only for the royal crowns. The lotus is a prominent solar symbol in India, associated with the images of the sun god Surya. Therefore, the lotus bud or blossom in the Kushano-Sasanian crown most probably also had solar significance. It seems that it was inspired by the Sasanian corimbus, but was adapted to Indian cultural and visual tradition. It is also possible that it reflects the continuation of the association between the ruler and the sun god current in the Kushan period. In any case, the lotus flower appears to be a Kushano-Sasanian innovation, not borrowed from the Sasanians or from the Kushans. It probably reflects a greater attachment of the Kushano-Sasanians to the Indian tradition and culture that it is usually acknowledged. In my opinion, the most remarkable evidence for the cultic syncretism in Kushan-Shachar appears on a new type of divine representation on coins that has no Kushan or Sasanian prototypes. The gods Nana, Vesh, and Anaita were also depicted as a bust rising from the altar. This altar is not the small Kushan incense burner, but the Sasanian fire altar. There is often confusion in scholarship between fire altar and incense burner. The Kushan incense burners are called fire altars, but they are not. The composition of the bust on the fire altar appears on Sasanian coins only later, and it was most probably borrowed from the Kushano-Sasanians. Here, the Sasanian representation. If this is indeed an original Kushano-Sasanian creation, as it seems, it was certainly meaningful. The fact that the busts emerged from the fire altar suggests that these gods were associated with the sacred fire and were worshipped with the Zoroastrian rituals. This probably reflects the fusion of the Kushan cult directed towards anthropomorphic statues of gods with the aniconic Sasanian worship centered on the sacred fire, which took place after the Sasanian conquest in Bactria. It is indeed this combination of divine statues and the Zoroastrian fire cult that we find in the Bactrian temples in the Kushano-Sasanian period. At Sur-Kotal, the sanctuary of the Kushan period, here, was replaced by Temple B, here, where the constantly burning fire was sustained. Here you can see the Temple B from the Kushano-Sasanian period with the altar here. And this is probably true also for the Temple D at the same site. However, the trident signs on the staircase, which seem to be contemporary with temples B and D, and thus dating to the Kushano-Sasanian period, suggest that Vesh was still worshipped at Sur-Kotal also in the Kushano-Sasanian era. A fire altar was installed also in another Kushan temple at Dilberjin during its third stage. Moreover, the cella of this temple was occupied by a tripartite platform, which probably served as a support for 3 divine statues. Here you can see the temple from Dilberjin, the plan of the third stage, which I think correspond to the Kushano-Sasanian period. Here you can see the tripartite platform, and this room was added later in the Kushano-Sasanian period with the fire altar here. Here you can see the pictures of this podium and the base of the fire altar. The excavations of the second sanctuary at Dilberjin, called Temple 10, also brought to light a throne with the remains of 3 divine statues. I'm sorry for the quality of the pictures, but these are the best ones available. The throne with the remains of 3 divine figures, statues. This is the best one which is preserved. Here is the reconstruction. One of them, of these 3 divine statues, was probably Vesh, and another statue was female, perhaps representing the goddess Nana. Here you can see the fragments of the heads from Temple 10. One female head with the crown, which resembles the crown, one of the crowns of Anaita on coin times, but not exactly the same, and one male head. The evidence from Dilberjin temples suggests that a triad of gods was venerated in the city in the Kushano-Sasanian period, but the identity of its third member remains unknown. I assume that one is Vesh, the second was probably Nano and Anaita, the third one is not clear. Be it as it may, it presents a valuable example of a new cult centered on the veneration of anthropomorphic statues of gods combined with the constantly sustained fire. I think that it is this combination that is graphically expressed on the Kushano-Sasanian coins that show busts of the triad, Vesh, Nana, and Anaita emerging from the from the Sasanian type fire altar. Yeah, it is exactly the type of the altar that we see here with 3 steps. It's a Sasanian type fire altar. Finally, a group of gods, among whom 3 enthroned deities stand out, one of them is female, is the focus of a ritual procession on a painting from Gulbiyan in northern Afghanistan. Here you see the procession headed by a large figure, partially preserved, probably of a ruler, which is going towards a group of enthroned gods. 1, 2, and 3. And there are additional figures of worshippers here and there. Perhaps there were another divine figures, but 3 are clearly visible. Yeah, and also another group of worshippers or priests here in the lower register. The subject of religious procession depicted at Gulbiyan bears only superficial resemblance to some Sasanian reliefs, where a group of high-ranking courtiers headed by a king always faces the anthropomorphic figure of a deity. However, while the Sasanian scenes are probably symbolic depictions of a coronation ceremony, the flowers carried by the characters at Gulbian reveal that this is a depiction of an actual ritual procession. Further, unlike the symbolic divine representations of the Sasanian reliefs, at Gulbian we see real and front statues of gods. The attributes depicted with the gods in the painting do not correspond to those held by the gods on the Kushan or Kushano-Sasanian representations, and thus their identification is uncertain. It is possible that some local deities are represented at Gulbian, but it is remarkable nonetheless what we see. It seems that we see again a triad of gods. The evidence discussed above shows that after the Sasanian conquest, the Kushan cultic practices centered on the veneration of the anthropomorphic images of gods continued to flourish under the new Persian rulers. Moreover, the latter actively promoted them and created statues for the newly introduced Persian gods, such as Anahita. The aniconic Sasanian cult was not imposed on the local population, but the iconography suggests that the worship in the Kushano-Sasanian Bactria was a fusion of libations before the anthropomorphic statues of gods and the veneration of the constantly sustained fire under the same roof in the same temple. It is this syncretic cult that was transported to Sogdiana in the north by Bactrian migrants in the 5th century. The Sasanians lost Kushan-Shahr to the Hunnic tribes in the 4th century CE. However, based on personal names from the Bactrian documents, it seems that the veneration of local Bactrian and Zoroastrian gods and the peculiar Kushano-Sasanian cult, which combined sacred fire and anthropomorphic divine representations, continued in Bactria-Tocharistan under the new nomadic rulers, who probably adopted the local religious practices as the Yuiji Tocharians, the ancestors of the Kushans, did almost 500 years earlier. And I would like to conclude with some reference to Cartier, to emphasize my statement that we do like him. Well, it is well known that in a famous passage in his inscription, he claims that he destroyed some idol temples, and it was often taken as some imposition of Sasanian religion over conquered regions. Now, well, the chronology of the Kushano-Sasanians is problematic, but Cartier, it is the height of his power was during the final third of the 3rd century. This is probably the beginning of the Kushano-Sasanian period. So at least in Bactria, the Bactrian evidence does not show even anything even remotely that can even remotely support the claim of Cartier that some kind of Sasanian cult was imposed on the conquered region, but the opposite seems to be true. These Kushano-Sasanian kings, which, well, from their names were obviously Persians, they probably belonged even to the to the Sasanian royal house. Once they arrived in Bactria, they adopted local cultic practices and local anthropomorphic cult, and they even manufactured and produced statues for gods that they brought from Sasanian Iran, like Anahita. So at least the Bactrian evidence clearly does not support Cartier's statement of some religious persecutions or imposition of Sasanian Zoroastrian cult on the conquered regions. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Could you please comment on the school of fish in the bowl under the seated figure?
this god is very interesting. He holds an arrow. It has Kushano-Sasanian style winged crown. Is depicted frontally. His legs are on some kind of carpet, and there is this strange element depicted below, which is usually described as aquarium with fishes. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's some kind of, well, this god, his legs rest on Ram's head. Perhaps it is some, well, many gods, they have zoomorphic attributes, so it's usually interpreted as these fishes as having some relation to the nature of these gods. It's pure speculation. Perhaps this god was associated with fishes and the ponent of sacred fishes, but we have absolutely no evidence, and there are a lot of speculation about the nature of these gods. Some scholars identify him with Tishtria, the Avestan god of rain, but I really don't know, because he's not depicted in the Kushan pantheon.
So how do you know it's a god and not a king?
Because he's enthroned, and the king must be here. And always in these processions, they are directed towards deities. And it will be really strange to find royal representations like that. It's much more suitable for divine representations. And they are associated also with additional figures of worshippers here, bringing gifts. I'm quite certain this should be gods because of the procession, bringing all kinds of offerings like flowers. But I'm not sure how to identify them. Franz Grenet, who should be here, and probably he's watching us. He has a stronger opinion about the identification of these gods, but I don't.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Michael, for the very inspiring and interesting talk. And it is, of course, plenty of information about Kushano-Sasanians, and this material, of course, is very interestingly analyzed. I have a couple of questions. One of them is a kind of chronological one. So for the coins, we can be completely sure that they were produced by Kushano-Sasanians. Also, there are also imitations of Kushano-Sasanians made by Kidarites, for example. But as for the seals, ceilings, metal objects, paintings, and so on, how much can we be sure that they were Kushano-Sasanian and not, say, these so-called Iranische Hunnen?
Yeah, it's a very important comment. Short answer, we cannot. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The seals are, the dating of the seals that I've shown is problematic. They can be later in the 4th century. They can be Kidarite. Correct. But coins, we are sure.
Yes, and another comment, they show the many coins with the bust of a deity on what you call fire altar. Mm-hmm. Yes, but actually I might be wrong. Maybe in Kish, but somewhere in Sasanian Mesopotamia we have very small columns where the busts were placed upon. Could there be any relation between the two?
Yeah, that's the object that you mentioned. It's a very interesting object. It's something which is peculiar to the Sasanian art. Pier Francesco Calieri has a very important article on that subject. In this case, I'm quite sure that this is a fire altar because it looks differently. It has these steps, it has these legs of the throne, which appear only on the coin of Ardashir, and often well, the quality of the coins are bad, but we even have fire sometimes. But the crucial evidence is, of course, the form of the stepped fire altar. The columns that are not stepped, that you mentioned from Kish, and the legs of the throne. I'll just go back for you for the coins of, for the Sasanian fire altar. On the, yep, here it is. Yeah. On the coins of Ardashir, there is absolutely no, I have no doubt that this is a fire altar from the Sasanian. Me too. From the Sasanian coins. Yeah. But regarding the date of the Kushano-Sasanians, the Sasanian coins, it is a hotly debated topic. I avoided it on purpose in my talk, but I may perhaps say a few words. This is obviously a debate that should be resolved by numismats. Specialist of coins. I can only say from the point of view of iconography, because of this presence of Anaita and the importance of Anaita on the Kushano-Sasanian coins, I'm thinking immediately about the period of Narse, because it was the only period in Sasanian history then Anaita was obviously preferred to Ahura Mazda. Narse was depicted her and not Ahura Mazda on his relief. He mentions her in his Paikuli inscription. So without going and avoiding the numismatic debate from this point of view, from point of view of iconography of Kushano-Sasanian coins, I would suggest the period of Narse, and I don't know, perhaps a little later. Thank you.
So thank you very much again for your talk, and we'll meet after the intermission, which starts now.